Earth shock, earthquakes, and meatballs and more is what you will get in Dragonflight Alpha on Elemental Shaman, because we have tested it with the new talent tree and everything that has gone into making Elemental a much more completed spell with so much fucking damage, man. Like, I've seen big numbers on my screen. Do you want to see big numbers? Well, stay tuned, because in today's video we will be checking Elemental Shaman in 10.0 Dragonflight with the new talents and everything and possible builds and all of that good stuff right here on Marcelian&Flame. And also right here on Marcelian&Flame is where you will find a lot of other videos on a lot of other specs. So far, the ones that have received some attention on Alpha, and more to come as we get into beta and eventually into the release of Dragonflight. So if you want to see more of this content and you'd like to support us a little bit more, we would graciously appreciate if you check the link down below for the Patreon page, where you can see a couple of tiers. If you want to support us a little bit more, it helps us put out this content for you consistently on I think a daily basis at this point. And yeah, you will be supporting pretty much everything that comes out, and of course the class guides that usually come out as well, streams that we have on twitch.tv/Marcelian&Flame, podcasts with community figures and theory crafters that you can see on our Mocast channel. So pretty much everything well related on Marcelian&Flame is supported by our Patreon page, a page that has a lot of wonderful people out there that have been with us for a long time and have made a lot of these possibles, like all of these cool cameras and lights and laptops and microphones and shit, all made with your help. So thank you very much for supporting us. Checking the link down below for the Patreon page one more time, and let's actually get into Elemental. As we've covered in the enhancement Shaman video as well, if you've missed it or if you have no interest in watching the enhancement whatsoever, the general tree is the biggest general class tree that I have seen so far. Rivals that of Druid, if not even bigger right now. A lot of 1-point skills that give you a lot of options. So there's a lot of utility, let's just say that. Totems are coming back, and I know a lot of people are interested in the totems. You have pretty much almost every totem that I've heard of, except for stuff like Sky Fury totem, which I know a lot of people wanted, but you do have Poison Cleansing totem, you have Mana Spring totem, you have Wind Rush, Earth Grasp, Stone Skin, all of the good, amazing totems. Utility, pure utility based. I don't think there's a single DPS totem in the general talent tree, which I guess it's kind of good because you don't really want to put throughput options in the talent tree, because those will probably become mandatory, so there's not much of a choice, but utility can always be swapped in and out. So with the totems, you also have totemic projection, I think it's called, where you can replace or rearrange the totems, and I actually had a lot of fun doing this in dungeons, where I can put Wind Wall totem or Wind Rush totem twice, right? So you can have your group go through the Wind Rush, and then you can reposition it just before it expires again in front of you, and the group goes again through the Wind Rush totem, and you get multiple movement speed buffs. And obviously you can do that with CC as well. There's some interesting capacitor totem talents as well that can give it either, you know, the normal one that we know where it has its cooldown reduced, or if it gets destroyed it can be replaced, which I think that's probably more oriented towards PvP. And maybe one of the most interesting things that have happened to the general Shaman tree, which I think I don't know if I've missed it in the enhancement, but you are now tanky. Holy fuck. You obviously get, Astral Shift, which is baseline 2-minute cooldown, 40% damage reduction. You can get 2 upgrades for it. You can choose one of which. One is to reduce its cooldown by 30 seconds, and I think increase its duration by... oh my god, is it 8 seconds? I can't remember. It's a lot. You can have that 40% wall on you for quite a bit, or the other option is to raise it to 70% damage reduction, which is nuts. It borders on immunity very close, because 70%, I don't think there's a single DPS in the game that has more than 40% damage reduction on a defensive. This is 70%. This rivals tank cooldowns, man. No. This is better than tank cooldowns. There's no tank cooldown in the game that can offer you 70% damage reduction. It's on a 2-minute cooldown. So gone are the days where enhancement and elemental by extension as well felt like very squishy DPSs. Obviously you're a range caster, so that comes with its own perks of being at range and, you know, being able to dish out those meatballs and those heals from a safer place. And of course there are a couple of talents that are probably mandatory because they do give you more damage. There's I don't know them by name because Names are weird right now. They change from build to build. But there's one that increases lightning bolt damage by 10%, and you can put 2 points in, so that's 20% lightning bolt damage. There's another one that increases, I think, nature damage or nature crit chance that you will probably have to get. Those are kind of like mandatory-ish. And outside of that, Wind Gust is also back, because I know a lot of people asked about Wind Gust. Wind Gust is back, and you can get Ghost Wolf with a lot of mobility, and you also have the Wind Rush that we mentioned before. So there is, I think, so far that we have seen, Elemental is probably the most mobile caster, and that's saying something considering that you have Evoker, rather Devastation if we're talking about DPS, that has so much mobility. So yeah, you can dodge all the shit, by the way. But with that out of the way, let's actually talk about the elemental talents, which were the actual things that we were able to experiment with. There are, as always, a couple of points and a couple of options that probably would feel better if they swapped their position in the talent tree, but it is what it is. From a general look at the talents, on the left-hand side, you have talents very focused on Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning, and closer towards the end of the talent tree, you have Echoes of the Great Sundering, which has been an amazing legendary for Elemental in Shadowlands. You know, casting that Earth Shock makes your Earthquake deal more damage, and I have played with it, and it does a lot of damage. You have Stormkeeper, and you also, I think, have Stormkeeper in the general talent tree, and the one in Elemental does not work. I think the devs are looking at it right now. I don't know if it's supposed to give you an upgrade to Stormkeeper, because sometimes these sounds do this, at least for balance. For instance, Moonkin form, if you get it a second time, because you can, it upgrades Moonkin form and stuff like that. Or it could give you a second charge of Stormkeeper, which would actually be pretty cool for Elemental. Definitely would be like a new feel or flow for the spec. There's also Lightning Rod, which I actually haven't had the chance to test it yet, because there's so much to do. Plus, right now, the specs that we have access to on Alpha are restricted to level 60. I am essentially missing about 5 talent points that I can put in the Elemental tree, and those talent points would officially round up some very solid builds. However, I did play the Earthquake build, and building towards the middle side of the tree, if you look, you'll have a lot of Overload talents working towards the mastery, clearly. And the last one that felt very interesting was, I think, Mountains Will Fall, or Fall of the Mountains, or something like that, that can make Earth Shock and Earthquake benefit from your mastery, from your overload, but at a 50% reduced state, which I thought it was cool, especially paired up with Echoes of the Great Sundering. However, I have logged them, and although numbers, are subject to change, the numbers are very, very undertuned for the overload damage. It was very tiny, like super tiny, very, very tiny, very little damage. So either the talent is undertuned, the logs are not working well, or the numbers are all of them subject to change. But if they do become tuned, it can make for an interesting playstyle where you have a very strong passive tree in a middle that focuses a lot on your mastery, and slapping those overloads, which is pretty cool. And of course, we're going into the right hand side of the talent tree, which is probably a little bit more interesting, and that is the fire side of the tree, with a lot of Flame Shock talent. Flame Shock can tick faster, Flame Shock can generate Maelstrom as it ticks, and Flame Shock can accumulate stacks of damage towards your next Earth Shock and Earthquake, which I believe is also legendary right now. You also have Skybreaker's Fiery Demise at the very end of the right hand side talent tree, which is really cool. I mean, I liked it. I liked having fire elements out very often in dungeons. However, all the way to the right hand side of the tree, you do have Storm Elemental rather, which is weird, maybe not really, but underneath it you have the Primal Elementalist talent tree, which I think is a choice between that and, god damn it, I don't know if it was Liquid Magma Totem. It must have been Liquid Magma Totem. Anyway, Storm Elemental being all the way to the right hand side of the tree is a little bit weird, considering all the Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning talents are on the left hand side of the tree, where also Stormkeeper is, and you would probably kind of always want Stormkeeper with Storm Elemental. So that is a little bit weird. I don't know if that's going to keep it that way, because on the left-hand side of the tree, closer to the Lightning Bolt, you have Primordial Wave, which I haven't mentioned before, which is obviously a Flame Shock option, and Lava Burst spreads to everything all around, where Lava Burst talents and Flame Shock talents are all the way to the right-hand side of the tree. Maybe it's probably done intentional, because Enhancement has some similar options, especially with Primordial Wave as well. So it's probably done intentionally so that you don't just go all the way to the right-hand side of the tree. And you could argue that, Primordial Wave works with the other side of the talent tree as well, but I digress. And a little bit between the right-hand side and the middle, you have Ascendants, and you have Deep-Rooted Elements, which is a legendary that you have right now, where you have a chance by, you know, launching your lava bursts out to get Ascendants for a couple of seconds and blast, and I actually played that, and it was pretty cool. The proc chance obviously is 7% for lava burst, and I kind of had to match it with Primordial Wave to see let's say a more often procced deeper rooted elements, because it felt a little bit weird to not have Primordial Wave. It would proc very slowly, and it would always proc at a wrong time. I couldn't time it right. Obviously, the dungeons that we do are the heroic Uldaman and heroic Niltharis, which are heroic dungeons. Shit dies really quick, and aside for a couple of bosses that seems to be a little bit overtuned, there's not enough time to build shit, to build resources, because this elemental doesn't have like a lot of ramp. But for instance, for the Echoes of the Great Sundering playstyle, you do have to, you know, generate Maelstrom, do an AoE, and also spreading your Flame Shock and doing an Earth Shock and then generating Maelstrom again and then popping an Earthquake. And usually by the time I was able to do that, mobs usually had about 20% left HP, which was not particularly great for testing, but I digress. These are the main two builds that I was able to play, because again, we don't have all of the talents to kind of diverge and try different things and quirks. I did play with the Liquid Magma Totem, which, if I recall correctly, last time I played with it, which is probably in BFA, did not have the Flame Shock spreading mechanic, so that's interesting, because Flame Shock can only be spread to 6 targets. I wasn't able to tell if I could spread it to 6 targets normally, and then pressing Liquid Magma Totem would spread it to a bunch more. We couldn't even pull that many mobs in the dungeon with what we can currently do, so I couldn't actually test to see the limits of my Flame Shock spreading, but suffice to say, it was pretty fun. It has a nice cadence to the rotation by having extra cooldowns. You do have a lot of buttons to press. It feels very meaty, and I've said this in the enhancement, but that was because I played enhancement before Elemental. Elemental might have the most amount of damage out there. Although I couldn't log pretty much properly what I wanted to see, the biggest numbers and the biggest flow in the rotation and more meaty and impacts and all of that good stuff happened on Elemental. So, if you are interested in maining Elemental in Dragonflight Alpha and you are not sure if it's still going to be average-ish spec as it kind of was in the last couple of years, although it feels like it's one of the most completed range specs, then fret not, because it is good. Obviously, numbers are subject to change, so take this with a pinch, big fucking pinch of salt. And, you know, don't judge it by that. But in terms of fluidity, in terms of build diversity, in terms of options and how fun it feels, it's amazing. And with the general talent tree giving you all sorts of options, utility, mobility, galore, it's hard to get bored by playing Shaman in 10.0. But who knows? You will be the judge of that, as you are the judge of our content. Again, thank you for watching the video. And if you are interested once again in supporting the channel, the Patreon link is down below. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to check it out and see a couple of tiers. Maybe there's some goodies there for you, because we do wallpapers and stuff and chats with the patrons and involve you in our creative process. Thank you to the existing patrons as well for supporting our content, and see you in the next video. Bye!
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.